All right, you guys, we're back again for another YouTube transmission, and I have my sweet friend Elizabeth Bercovici back, who's been on the channel a few times now. We've done a few different pieces of work together, so I'm so happy to have you back, Elizabeth. And we're going to be talking today about initiations of the dark feminine, and this is such a powerful conversation, and I really wanted to have Elizabeth here to talk with us about this, but particularly around some of the Celtic dark goddesses, because this is like really her territory, and like she knows some of these goddesses so well, and I don't work with some of these Celtic goddesses, so I wanted to bring her in. And this conversation is really going to be about what we can expect from initiations with the dark goddess, how that can look different with each different goddess. We're going to bring in a few different ones, share some of our own experiences, or just, seeing how these initiations occur. So stay tuned if you want to watch all that. But first, Elizabeth, do you want to just introduce yourself if anybody hasn't seen you before?
Oh, hello to everyone. My name is Elizabeth Bercovici. I work, my company is called Magical Storytelling. So I love to bring through magical stories of different Celtic goddesses. And I run a lot of different like online sacred events and fundraisers. So I am just very, very excited to be here. One of my favorite things to do is to like dive deeply into the myth and lore of like the ancient past. So I'm just like really delighted by today's conversation.
Elizabeth is an amazing storyteller. You guys, I'll put in the description, you have to get her one of her free gifts so that you get emails from her so you can watch some of the summits she puts on. They're phenom. So I'll make sure to do that if you want to stay connected with her. I'll have all of her information in the description. And if anybody's new to me, my name's Allie Wilkins. I teach about the ancient feminine. I'm an oracle and a mystic, and there's so many definitions, but it's like all encompassing. But I'm really passionate about the revival of the ancient feminine, and that she's not meant to stay in the past. We're meant to remember this part of ourselves and awaken her. So that's a lot of the work that I do as an oracle and as an author and a teacher. So I hope that you enjoy this transmission today. So, Elizabeth, do we want to just start? Do you want to just share what your experience of initiation with the dark feminine is? Whatever you feel called to share first.
Yeah, I've had so many different initiations. Really, like the ones that I feel really wanting to come through right now. I feel like Queen Maeve, Queen Maeve, and the Morrigan. And I was just recently in Ireland. For those of you who are not familiar with me, it's like Ireland has claimed me, and so I was just there. It was about like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm going back in about 4 or 5 days, and when I was there, I've had a lot of deep revelation and experiences with the Morrigan. And I think I'm wondering if I should start at the beginning of my relationship with her, because some of the people I'm sure who are listening are not familiar with my work. And I can say it all started at like two Imbolcs ago, actually maybe 3 Imbolcs ago. And I did this whole big online event with the goddess Bridget. And afterwards, I was like, I'm called to teach a class. Like it was like a 1 day class called Word Magic with Bridget. And it was my first time. I was just starting out as an online entrepreneur. And it was my first time like really holding space like that. And I was like shaking in my boots, like, oh, I'm so scared. And like the morning of the class, out of nowhere, the Morrigan came to me. And it was just like basically it was this transmission that came through to be fearless. And it was like, have no fear. I am with you. I am walking with you. And there's more to the story. I could go into greater depth, but I just want to like fast forward. Because I've told the story many times for my audience are probably like, oh, she just keeps telling this. But anyway, so no, but so the Morrigan, that's when I was conscious that the Morrigan was walking with me. And she literally, she like heralded such great evolution for my soul. And that summer, I actually ran a summit called Fearless, all inspired by her wisdom and tenacity in her sacred teachings. And I kind of felt, and I was still afraid to meet her. It was funny because even though we'd had that great moment of bonding when she first came to me, There's something so formidable about her presence that it kind of kept me like a little bit at arm's length from her. I was afraid to really traverse the boundaries between me and the Morrigan. And a lot of people, I know even people who have worked with the Celtic goddesses for 20 plus years, they still are afraid of the Morrigan. Like they don't want to work with her. And yet I felt this goddess, and this is very similar to like that Kalima energy, this goddess who many feared was coming toward me with like the like arms outstretched, like unconditional love, her being like, I want to help you. I want to help you realize your potential. It was this deep, like, I don't want to even say unconditional love because it was beyond unconditional. It was powerful love. That's really what it was. And it was this desire for me. And again, I think this is like everyone who's listening to this call. And it was a desire for me to be initiated into my full power, to claim it fully, unconditionally, and unapologetically. And I think that's the real thing too, is because I've had to go on a bit of a journey. Even like stepping into my power, there's still that like, oh, is it okay if I do this? Is it okay if I like take this leap? The Morrigan is like, yes, you do this, and you like, it doesn't matter what people think of you. And I want to share, so on my most recent trip to Ireland, I was there for the Lionsgate. This is being recorded in 2024. And it was so funny. So one of the big Morrigan sites is the Cave of Cats. It's like by like an ancient site called Rathcrogan, which is sacred to Queen Maeve. And on this day, it's like everything was blocked off. We couldn't get, and we're searching for, I had never been to the Cave of Cats before. I just knew it was like, you must go here. The Morrigan is calling you. And if you see pictures of this online, it doesn't look really impressive. It just looks like a hole in the ground. And so I'm just like, I can't, like, it's like, and it's on like private property. So I was just like, I don't know, I can't find this. It's just, I surrender. Like, I'm not supposed to find this today. And my driver was like, I'm going to keep looking. I'm going to get you as close to this cave as I can get you. And when we finally got there, it was like, okay, we can only be here for like 5 minutes. Like, but I share this because I had like the Morrigan, like literally draw us to the spot, like draw us to the spot. And it was like very powerful because it was this moment of her saying like, don't be afraid to like, I don't know how to explain, like to get where we went, it was just like, it was a lot of winding roads, a lot of not knowing the way, a lot of basically saying like, I think that this is unfindable. I think we will never find our destination. And every step of the way, the Morrigan's saying, I am walking with you. And I think that, and so when we finally got to the spot, I literally just like basically like kissed the land. I was just like, I felt this love from her, but it was also this cave really is the mouth of the other world. So like it's like it is a portal to the other world. And it was like this moment where like the other world's like unconditional love just poured through. And so I share this because so many of us, I think, Allie, I know you're creating this really beautiful course that like archetypally you work with all the different faces of the dark goddess. And I think part of what happens is like, there is like an archetypal, it's like an alchemy that starts to happen when you work with these goddesses or when you work with these archetypes, and you recognize that the power they have was always within you. You just need to unlock it. More than that, though, is that there are actual beings, divine beings, who they are holding the codes, they are holding the wisdom and the keys to guide you in the unlocking of these sacred divine parts of you. And usually the parts of us that we need to have activated for us to step into our full power, like they can only come from the dark goddess. Like, I mean, there are, of course, all different initiations that we have, but I'm saying specifically codes of power. There's something about codes of power in this world where we have been so conditioned and so trained to people please, and I hope that I feel like I'm just rambling here. Hopefully this is cohesive for everyone. But I want to just share that, in my personal life, I've also been doing some pivoting in my business, going more into the world of film. And I know that like I grew up hearing like, oh, it's like a man's world and there's all that kind of misogyny like in the workplace. And I was just like, oh, I'm starting divine feminine business. And so I just like, even though I believe that that was a paradigm, like I kind of felt like that was an archaic paradigm, like something that I would never encounter or experience. And I won't go into specific details, but in the last few months, since I started to move more into the world of film, I have met this energy and I was like shocked. I was like, wait, this is still a thing? I was like, this is still a thing that exists. And I realized even more powerfully, it's like, this is why someone like the Morrigan is calling like divine feminine women to fully unapologetically step into their power. It's it's because we're living in a world that needs the fierce feminine. And I think a lot of times people who are, very, very spiritual, it's like we might do our activations, our meditations online or by ourselves. And like, I think that like we're very nourished by them. But when we really want to go out into the world and make change, there is a lot of 3D interference in our way. There can be walls, there can be barriers and blockades. And different goddesses like the Morrigan, they tell you to go over the barrier fearlessly and to trust, if necessarily, trust only yourself because you have what it takes to get to the other side.
So beautiful. There's so many things I want to say in response to this, but first, like, do you guys just see what I mean about how great of a storyteller she is?
I was like, how all these threads are weaving.
They absolutely are. And I want to first touch on something I think that is so important that you spoke to, that so many people are afraid of the dark goddess. And I always think about Kali this way, and I speak about her in this kind of tone, that when the dark goddess first wants you to be aware of something, it's like you'll hear Kali, and anyone who maybe hasn't worked with Kali before, she typically is shown in, she's all blue and she has her tongue out and she wears a necklace of skulls. And the skulls are representing all of the old beliefs she's shattered. It's not these people she's killed, it's these belief systems and ways of being that are no longer serving us. And so it's like she's collected them as like a prize, like, oh, my steward Allie or my steward Elizabeth, this one I'm looking out for. Look at all that she's transmuted. And so I speak about Kali, like, we'll hear her at some point. It's like you can hear the skulls clanking as she's walking down the street to approach your house. And this is kind of when we have the thought of like, maybe I shouldn't live here, or maybe I should get I'm not happy in this relationship or in this job, or we start to have these kind of sounds of doubt that come in, or like, it's not so much doubt, it's like words that are wanting us to redirect, but oftentimes we wait so much, we don't act on it immediately. And so Kali starts to approach the house, and you'll feel her magnitude approaching you. And then this is when your inner knowing is getting stronger and stronger, and it's building to the point that it's like uncomfortable. And then she bangs on the door. She's like, let me in. You've got to deal with this. It's time to change. What happens, I think, is that in our society, especially if we look at the last 100 years or so, we have ignored her call so much that then she does have to become so incredibly intense. And I say it this way, that Kali will bang down your door and then she'll kick down the door if you still ignore her. And then she'll set your house aflame. And that's when we can have these really, like the rug pulled out from under you moments. And that's why I think sometimes the perception of the dark goddess can be like, she's terrifying. But my experience, and it sounds like this is what you did with the Morrigan as well, is when we learn how to walk hand in hand with them and go to them first rather than waiting for them to kick down our door because we've ignored them for so long, then it's such a different experience. And it's always coming from that deep-rooted unconditional love that you spoke to. When we can go in and start to call upon them before we get into that space, it does feel like that. I've had the same experience with Sekhmet that you talked about with the Morrigan, where it's just like, come here, child. Like, I love you so deeply that I don't want you to be in any situation that is not of your highest good or where you're having to stifle yourself or suppress yourself. And this could be in so many different areas of our life, right? Where we're holding certain belief systems or we are programmed in a specific way that we aren't even aware of because we've just been in the culture for so long. And I like the message I really want to get across about the dark goddess is that she's not this terrifying like beast. She's super loving. It's like, sometimes she will show up as like the mother who rips the child's hand away from the stove when he's about to touch it because it's boiling hot. And so sometimes she can be a little intense in that way, but it's always coming from this deep-rooted unconditional love. And what I see as well is people can be so afraid of these goddesses, and I'm just like, my experience of them is that they're like so loving. I think that it's just the timing that we choose to work with them. And when they do come in, we don't see it as you're trying to rip this away from me. You've taken this away from me. You're, stealing this person that I adore so much. I can't leave them. And it's like this clinging to attachment or to old identities that we've had that we do cling to so strongly. And my experience is that I've learned to just say, okay, I trust you. Something better, something more aligned for me is here. And I've noticed that whatever it is that she takes from me, in quotes, it's always replaced by something that's so much more deeply nourishing in the most magical of ways.
I love that. Yeah, no, I feel that so strongly too, because everything you're saying, I don't know. I think that the dark goddesses want to take us on the thrill of a lifetime. I think that's the whole thing. It's while you were talking, I had this song that started coming through, and it was like an old song called Confident. And like I think that's the whole thing is, especially like I feel like what's really coming through as I'm talking right now is like that kind of Lilith Eve dichotomy. And I want to make it clear to the audience, I believe these are actual beings that you can work with. I don't believe they're just confined to like Old Testament literature. And if you connect, Eve also has a lot of wisdom and a lot of pearls that she brings through. But I think, as I'm going into this, like there is a confidence that when you know how to kind of wield like the different archetypal energies, and when you are really, I know that we were also talking about the primal goddess, when you know how to like to sink into that, it's like you are able to come into the world with full confidence in yourself, confidence in your purpose, your message. And I think so many, especially women in particular, I think a lot of us struggle with like body image issues. We struggle with holding that confidence. And I feel that when you work with the dark goddess, that is like one of the first medicines that really comes through. And what I'm sensing here for your audience, I'm sure a lot of them have actually done some work in the past with the dark goddess. But one thing that I love with the Morrigan with Sekhmet is that there's always another initiation. There's always more embodiment. There's always more deepening. There's always the next level. And so I feel like, again, the word that's really coming through is confidence, because I feel these goddesses have helped me so much step into my confidence, but it's like to be unapologetic about who I am, about how I create. And this is very interesting for me because I've shared this with you before. I have in my chart, my rising sign is Libra. So the shadow of Libra is that people pleasing. I mean, in its exalted state, it is like Libra is all about harmony and balance. So ultimately, there would be a lot of harmony and balance. But because I've been sometimes in different times in my life more in a place of disempowerment in my personal relationships, like it would be more of the shadow. And in that shadow, I would be in people pleaser because that just would be how I oriented. And I found my voice being silenced, my needs being silenced. And this kind of goes to what Allie was saying, how the dark goddess reaches a moment where it's just like, no more, like, no more of this. And really, to me, like that's the call of your soul. And so I'm sharing this because I feel that what actually one of the things the dark goddess does is and the dark goddess within and without, because I feel like they're both working in the same way, it is to help you create harmony within yourself, harmony in your relationships, and harmony with the natural world. Because if we lose the dark goddess, we are out of balance. Like the creation itself is not in balance. So we really need that aspect to be cultivated, and to be cultivated wisely and well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you spoke to so much there that is so important because we look at like what's happening in the, like just the state of the world. You know, there's issues with every area of life. And I think that this is because of the absence of the dark goddess, of the dark feminine. And when you were speaking to like the confidence and just so much around this, I feel that this really roots in the programming that we've received for thousands of years as the dark feminine was really being buried historically, where she wasn't allowed to show herself or she would be killed. You know, and we're not just talking about like witches here in the last 1,000 years who were burnt or drowned or tortured or whatever. This goes back so much further than that. Really, I would say to 2500 BC when we started to see the fall of the feminine and her exaltation, where certain aspects of our femininity started to be demonized. And it's, you know, if you think about, I feel like looking at like the 1600s, we have some frame of reference to that more than we do about like the 800s or the 400s. You know, we have an image of the 1600s woman, and it's like she's silent, meek, and humble, right? She can't speak her mind. And all of that is the result of the programming we've experienced. So when you're speaking to confidence, what was coming through for me is like, even today, the programming that tells women we can't be so many different things, like we won't be accepted. In the back in the day, in the, you know, in 1900s, it was like, well, no man will choose you as his wife if he thinks you're disobedient, or if he thinks that you're, you know, too outspoken, or if you like dress crazy, or you're too unique. Like you need to conform. And that's the result. Like the dark feminine is like, hard pass for me, thanks. And so all of this, like when even when it's like we've forgotten our power in such a deep way because she's had to be buried for so long. And what I was starting to say was even now, like when people see a confident woman, all of a sudden, like I saw this thing that said, you know, when a woman is doubtful of herself and she's trying to learn how to be confident, other people will celebrate her. But when she actually has that confidence, then people are threatened by that, and so they start to tear her down. Right.
Yes, that's what I'm so glad that you said that. Because no, because I just like suddenly heard like this song coming through. I was like, oh, I'm supposed to bring up this energy of confidence. No, and it's I think you're exactly right, because I in my personal life, I just, have in my past been more like underestimated. People have underestimated me, but on the outskirts, they're cheering me on. And the moments where I actually speak my mind, stand in my truth, stand in my power, they're like, "Oh God!" Like, and it's like people are like, "Holy shit!" It's but that is the true face of the goddess, because the goddess in her earliest incarnations, she brought awe. Like, and when we look at, like, I think what's really coming through, like the prehistoric even the worship of the goddess, it's like, we would look upon the goddess with such awe. There would be rituals, there would be so much coming together where we celebrated the goddess in our hearts. It wouldn't just be like, I mean, I want to I'm trying to figure out the right language for this, but I think at this point, like, we even spiritual people, when we celebrate the goddess, sometimes we forget the magic of it, because it's everywhere now. It's ubiquitous. It's just like the goddess, the goddess, the goddess. We've reclaimed her, but like sometimes we do so without remembering the awe of what it really is to behold the divine, what it really is to embody the divine. And so that's just something I really feel when we talk about the goddess. It's getting back into that place first and foremost of awe, and stepping into, like, it is really the power of creation itself.
Hmm. When you're speaking about the awe, it's like the goddess held all. She was all things. So we've been taught, and I teach about this in like a lot of my courses because I think that it's so imperative to understanding like the context of history and the feminine and what's happened to us. And, the very, very, very short version, we were split into good and bad aspects. So we see like, even when we're talking about the dark goddess, the only reason she's called the dark goddess is because we've pushed her out of the limelight. We've said, okay, well, we can work with Mother Mary, who also was very church washed, and she was definitely very dark feminine as well. But we can work with Mother Mary, who is like, representing this like vast peace. That's the way that I feel called to say it right now. Like she's safe, but then Sekhmet or Kali or Durga or any of these other dark goddesses, like they're scary. You don't want to embody them. And I think that so much of the work in talking about the dark feminine is understanding how demonized she's been. And we can think about this from even going back to the 1600s, like, or 1200s. It happened for a long time. People would be watching in their small town their neighbor be hung as a witch, and so it's like, oh, well, she spoke her mind. She didn't conform. So that scares me. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to conform and be polite and pretty and not speak against anyone and not spoke unless I'm spoken to. And I don't want to offend anybody. So I'm not going to be that way. And then generations later, over thousands of years, then you spoke to the people pleaser mask. And I think we all are people pleaser tendency. And it's like, we all have that. And the good girl mask, which is what I was just talking about, well, I want to be liked, I want to be approved of. So I'm just going to act like I think someone wants me to. I don't want to disappoint them. So I'm going to people please to make them happy. Like I used to think I didn't do this because I was just born very like blunt and direct and just like,
Very authentic. Very, very authentic.
thank you. And I did, so I was like, I don't people please. And then I had this big initiation this year where I saw like, oh, this whole relationship I had actually with someone has been so tainted because I was doing that and I wasn't even aware of it. And the good girl, something I discovered when I started teaching Realm of the Dark Feminine last year when I was creating it, I just had like all these downloads come in. And it was like the good girl blocks the dark feminine. We can't be in both at the same time. So even just the process of learning, like, where am I holding this good girl mask, which could be very severe, where you're hiding your entire personality because you're conforming completely, or at a lesser level where you're still, what's coming through now is like the chameleon, how a lot of people say, like, oh, I'm a chameleon, I can fit into any environment. But like, can we actually hold our authenticity in every environment without shifting? And of course, like, I speak to my parents differently than I speak to my best friend or something. Like there's a little bit of a different context because of the relationship. However, where is it that we're chameleoning ourselves in a way that's hiding our truth? And
Mm.
like even just that part of it is like, okay, here's the next decade of discovery.
Yeah, no, I love that. And one thing that's kind of coming through as you were talking, I think it's this idea of like the good girl. It's like the good girl is a mask. And I kind of want to clarify for the audience, because those of you who know me, I do a lot of work with the Holy Grail, the codes of Avalon. And so for me, goodness is a big thing. I literally, to me, being a force for good, that's why I'm here. Like, so when we say like the good girl mask, it doesn't mean you're not a force for good, because
Yeah.
that's the thing, is to be that force for good, it usually requires actually putting down that good girl mask. And so I really want to clarify that, because I think that's been the misunderstanding right then and there. So for me, what I really go deeply into, I feel this in my body, it's when we connect with, whether it's like the dark feminine, whether it's goddesses that are considered more like light goddesses, maybe like Isis, even someone like Eve, I really feel that we are opening up to like the goodness, the true goodness that lies at the heart of creation. And they all, like, I feel like all these divine beings that we are connecting with, they hold that highest octave of true goodness. And so it's just a matter for me of mastery, of mastering different elements of myself, that I can be the channel for that goodness here on earth, that I can be the embodiment of it. And that's why I feel like it's so important to really master these different archetypal energies in their glory, in their fullness, in their beauty, and their vastness as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that in. I would refer to what you were just talking about as like integrity. And for me, that's also just like so strong. Like it's such a guiding factor. And all of these energies that we're talking about, it's like they want what is of the highest good for all. So one thing that Elizabeth just brought through that I want to speak to for a moment around the shadow side that can sometimes come out. And I'm going to give an example here around that I like feel so strongly about. And so last year when I was starting to launch the realm of the dark feminine, I asked everyone, what is the archetype that we're working with that you feel most resistant towards? And 90% of people said the seductress. And I was like, that's so interesting. I would have thought it would be like, the Mad Woman or the witch or something, or the truth teller. And almost everyone said the seductress. And so I really started to feel into that and ask questions in the records. And they were like, that's because my guides were like, that's because they think that the seductress is the femme fatale, because the femme fatale in the last 5-10 years, maybe even since the early 90s, when there were a lot of movies that depicted this energy, it's like she's been so glorified. And when we sit into the femme fatale, her actual definition is basically a woman who seduces someone else to their demise.
Yes.
to so a lot of us who are really led by integrity, because I was like, why is everybody so resistant to this frequency? And my guide said it's because they're led by integrity, so they don't want to be embodying something that is going to be harming others. And you spoke to this earlier around the harmony that's cultivated in our own life, and this is also external as well. Like the dark feminine guards the harmony and balance of the entire world. So going back to this, okay, so pulling back a little. So when we're talking about these archetypes, they can be used in exaltation, or they can be also used with poor intention or even just immaturity. And because we don't have a lot of spaces to practice being in our dark feminine, because she's almost always going to receive backlash from people who haven't integrated that part of themselves that will scare them. Or like I've had so many people say like you're doing the demon's work like for years, like even if I was just, working with a single crystal. Like and so when we're thinking about, okay, we're learning how to hold these archetypes, it's helpful to understand what are the shadows that can come out. So when I was looking at the femme fatale energy, I was like, well, this archetype has a lot of power and a lot of gifts. The only issue with it is that it's rooted in a win-lose situation. So the person holding the femme fatale energy is in the win situation, and then the person that she's dealing with is in a lose situation and I feel that this is more like the succubus energy where someone's taking. And of course, there's like a lot of variants of the femme fatale energy. Someone could be like a con artist or something, or someone could just be going into the power of the femme fatale. And so there's a large range here. But I thought, okay, who is the femme fatale in her exaltation then? And I just heard immediately the high seductress. And so this is, I feel like really ownership of this name, but I'm like, I've got to let it go. Like, because so the high seductress, sort of like the high priestess. She's using her gifts of seduction and groundedness and confidence and like flirting with life itself, not like we take away the context of just men, because the seductress is often talked about in relation to sexuality or like sexually seducing someone. And it's really having this artistry of seduction like in your bones towards everything in life. And so I started to really feel into how does she act? What does she look like? She has this frequency of like her feminine energy is fully installed, yet she also has this queen energy where she's fully able to take care of herself. She opens up and she's vulnerable with others, but she's not reliant on anyone else, which can put people into positions sometimes where, then we have to make choices that might be out of alignment or are more difficult. So that's just one example of how one of these archetypes, and I'll give another one too in a second because this one's coming through, of the shadow side of the same archetype that can be showcased with exaltation. And a lot of it, I feel, is we just don't have that many mature embodiments of the dark feminine because she's not celebrated. So people who are really truly in their like deep rooted dark feminine, they're not really going to be showcased a lot of the time because they're not approved of by the patriarchy. So why would a patriarchal construct put them on a pedestal so then all the other women follow her? Like that's the opposite of the patriarchal construct. So another example of this is the Mad Woman. And the Mad Woman, like we've really only seen her in the shadow aspect, which is she's disconnected from reality. Like she's untethered from and dissociated from reality in such a way that it's not for her highest good. And this might be, as an example, you could think about the person who's like muttering nonsense walking the streets and she's like not caring about her own safety. She's disconnected from the groundedness of knowing what she needs to thrive. And there's, of course, a lot of different reasons that someone could go into this state. But when we look at the Mad Woman from in her exaltation, it's like this is actually a beautiful invitation for all of us. And I feel this is the archetype that truly is most feared because everyone wants to be approved of. So the Mad Woman is like a creative genius. And she's able to untether from the constructs of society and from caring what other people think about her and caring about her perception in a way that still honors her needs and her connection to the earth plane and to society. So she's not like, just by herself for the rest of her life being disassociated, but she's in her creative brilliance where she can separate herself from the systems that we have here, see things in a different creative way. And I think a lot of artists have tapped into this energy, or a lot of people who create new things. We could even think about, well, I don't want to bring some of these people in. Think about people who are inventors or who bring in totally new technologies. They have to have some of this like divine madness to be able to see outside of the box, but they're still well, some of them are still tethered to the earth plane. And what I feel the magic is with the Mad Woman is really removing, like not caring what people think about us in a way that we're still in connection to other people, but we're not guided or obligated to act in certain ways so that people will approve of us.
Yeah, no, I love that. I just like I was actually very almost like taken aback by your deep exploration of the Mad Woman archetype because first I was like, yeah, yeah. And then you're like, oh, it's that creative genius. I was like, wait, hold on. I'm telling you, a lot of the productions that I put together, like they came together like at the last moment, like it's like at the penultimate moment, and I would just be weaving the pieces, like, okay, God, let's bring this together. And it was really, I don't know, I think a lot of people actually probably have seen this movie. It's like the second Thor movie. There is like this part at the end of the movie where like he reunites with Loki and they have to go through, like they have to get to another realm, and there's this tiny little crevice that they have to take a ship right through, and it's like, oh my God, we're gonna die, we're not gonna make it. And Loki's guiding it, and he turns to Thor and he says, you know if it wasn't crazy, everyone would do it. And it's like, and it's one of those things that might not be the exact line, but it's like very, very similar. And it's like one of those things where I feel that there are moments that we are called to go through the eye of a needle. And that eye of a needle, it requires sometimes a wee bit of madness. It requires, complete, I feel like it's like connection to the divine realms, and those divine realms are beyond comprehension. So you have to really be open to sometimes to trusting those forces beyond comprehension, because you are coming from an embodied place of deep trust and knowing. And
Mhm.
so I think, again, like it really comes to being the master of these energies within the discernment. Am I, even though I don't have all the information, even though all hasn't been revealed to me, do I trust enough? Do I know that I can go through the eye of this needle? And so I want to reflect back to how beautiful that was. And I also want to say, we can go more into this. I love that energy of the high seductress. Because when you were first the high seductress, I felt the transmission of that energy. And I really felt that when I was in Ireland. Queen Maeve has also like adopted me. She's very much like, I love you. And Queen Maeve, I'm not kidding though. It's so funny because I mean there are stories of like the legends of Queen Maeve, um, which depict her as, more of a battle, a battle warrioress. And but there are also legends where she sleeps with 100 men in one night. So she really holds like what you're talking about is that like deep embodiment of sexuality because that people have feared her. And yet it's kind of through connecting with some of these aspects of sexuality that we can step into the full spectrum of our own personal power. So just really wanted to reflect back all the goodness that you just brought through.
Yeah, there's even with the Mad Woman, I like feel her like I'm not done with you yet. Like
Oh,
I
it's
still
fine.
want
I was
to
like, oh,
share. Um, even when we think about, so I'm going to share a personal experience here that I've been sitting with for the last couple years. And so I've had my business for 7 years. I'm very vocal about my beliefs. I'm very like um direct about how I feel about things online and in person with other people. And my family, like whenever I go back to family, like big family vacations or, like where everybody's all together, I've had this experience where, and this is, I think, Mad Woman embodied energy, where no one knows how to identify me in any way. They're like, we have no idea what her work is really. Like, we're paying, like, we don't understand what she does because it's not like doctor, nurse, teacher, firefighter, like these traditional, like,
it doesn't fit in the box. What will we
she doesn't
do?
fit in the box in any way. Like right now, she's not in a partnership. She's traveling aimlessly. Well, that's not maybe the right word, but she's traveling. She's not even tied to like, oh, how was Florida? Like, and I just noticed when, especially in this last year where it's like kind of all forms of my like I don't fit into any boxes. And it's interesting how, and my family is very loving. They're never like mean or anything about this. I just noticed it on a very subtle level of like people don't know what to define me as. And I think sometimes that makes people uncomfortable or like they don't know how to orient to me. And there's been so many times when I've sat in this question of like, well, should I? And then Lilith is like, no, but I sit in this question of like, well, am I doing something wrong? Because then I'm surrounded by like, a huge group of people who are all doing um very like matrixy things and bringing their own artistry and genius to it, of course. But people who aren't operating in the same space that I'm in. And it's like, well, am I doing something wrong? And this is like a decade into doing all this work and feeling so confident in the importance of what I'm doing and all these things. And the Mad Woman energy is really like, I will not budge in my authenticity to make someone else more comfortable. I just wanted to bring through an example of how I've seen that show up in my own life, this Mad Woman energy, where there can be this desire of like, the desire to conform is so strong, even if like I have this very strong, I wouldn't call myself a rebel, like I don't really hold that energy, but like if something doesn't align with me, I've just always been very like no. And I want to talk about this too because I feel that some of these goddesses find us when we have no idea that it's them. And for me, Lilith really found me like in some of my first like adult jobs, getting a salary and working full time. And I remember one day I was just sitting in front of the computer and I was like 23 or something. And I was just like, is this all there is? And I just was looking around me and all these people were sitting in this like windowless room in front of computers and it was just like that I refuse to do this for the rest of my life. Like I'll just wait 50 years until I retire. And it was this seed of Lilith that was coming through of like, you don't have to do this. And I sat with it for a while and I was like, but what other options are there? And then I talked to other people about it and they were like, well, you just do this. This is just part of being an adult. You just have to suck it up and like find the little gratitudes and joy, which that's true. But also, nobody understood my yearning of like, or my refusal to participate was like in my bones, this feels horrendous. Like, I can't do this. This isn't what I'm meant to be doing. And so then it took me on this large initiation for years of figuring out like, who am I really? And first, I started by going to Bali, doing yoga teacher training and quitting my job. And that fearlessness that you spoke to, it was like, I have to just trust because this call is so strong. Like I hear Kali walking down the street with her skulls clanking, and the call is so loud, I can't ignore it. And what I always think of here, and you've referenced this a few times in different ways, is these God, I think that these deities are truly real beings that can support us and have these like otherworldly powers that can help us. But they're also aspects of our own psyche. And so, like Sekhmet, for example, or Lilith might be activating this fearlessness within me that just it's like I see it as like a DNA strand that hasn't been that's been like dormant for 2,000 years, and they help to activate it. But there's a process when they're doing that, and I also see it as it's like, okay, for example, women aren't supposed to be like raging. Women aren't, but this is like a feeling that we all have. You know, we all have the capacity to feel immense, like consuming rage. And it's like, well, that's not allowed in the patriarchal society. So we're just gonna stuff her on down in the basement, lock the door. And it's like initially it was the church and these old systems, these old patriarchal systems that did this. But now I see it as we are the one holding the, like keeping the door locked. We can unlock it because we have, in the West at least, we have the freedom to showcase this part of ourselves. The real threat isn't deathly if you're in the West. And of course, there's things going on in Afghanistan where that is not true, and in other places in the world. But the biggest threat we face is being socially ostracized. And even that threat, you know, people even not understanding you or uh, not like approving of what you're doing, even that threat can be big enough that we're like, well, I'll just keep it locked just a little bit longer. And something really big for me in this round of Realm of the Dark Feminine, because I always get new downloads, you know, whenever I'm launching something new. And in this one, it's really been, we are not whole in our feminine psyche. Like we are fractured in our psyche when we're not allowing all parts of ourself to exist and when we're keeping any part of ourself locked away. And how you were saying, like with each initiation, we can go into a deeper level with the same goddess. Like there's always deeper realms. And I don't see it as like, okay, I'm unlocking the door and taking all of my dark feminine aspects out now. It's like, okay, first I'm going to reclaim the bravery to step into the unknown. So I'm going to grab this little part of myself and then we learn how to be with that. And then it's like, okay, well now I'm like starting to really feel this layer of trauma. And this is, I think, how the dark feminine often speaks first, especially when we get into the really deep stuff. It's like she expresses through rage because it's been like pent up for so long where we haven't had the permission to express it. And for me, last year, I had a huge initiation when I opened Realm of the Dark Feminine, where Lilith, it was like, it wasn't Lilith's energy. It's what I'm seeing is that it's the trauma of having to suppress so much for so long. And I'm talking like collective feminine, not even our own lives, where so much has been pent up that we just, it's like this, you know, dragon fire that comes out. But even within that, like we can learn how do I steward this dragon fire, because it can be used in beneficial ways. It can also be used to like destroy a whole village. So like then learning how, as these individual aspects come out that we're pulling out one by one, what my real intention is with Realm of the Dark Feminine is to help people, and myself included. I attended this as a student, even though I'm facilitating. It's like two different faces of myself. And it's like we get to learn how to maturely embody these, because the energy is just going to come out and it can be used, whether it's, you know, in whatever way she comes out for you. It can be used for detriment and damage and destruction, which destruction sometimes can be beneficial, or it can be used for the highest good of all. And neither of those necessarily look like anything particular. But even for me, like, and for example, the truth teller is a very natural archetype that I have. Like, I've just always really held that. It's never been difficult for me to speak my truth, and I like don't understand when other people have problems with it. And until I see past lives and stuff like that. But for me, even I went into, and the truth teller is one of the faces we talk about in Realm of the Dark Feminine. And when I went into that week in the course, I was like, oh, this one will be a breeze. Like, I'm so good at this. This is like, I'm very natural at this embodiment. And then I was shown, well, here's how you're not using it with love. Here's how you're not using it in a way that's actually most beneficial. You need to now learn how to cultivate the ability to speak so it can be received. How can you now, you've mastered just speaking your truth without fear, but how can you cultivate it in a way that people can truly receive what you're saying? Or where there's not a trauma response kind of blended in there. And so then that was a whole nother level of embodiment. And then there's going to be more and more and more because we're like amateurs in the dark feminine. We haven't seen her in our society long enough. Like I would say the beginning of her was like maybe 1930s, a little bit with like the flapper outfits, and then women were like showing their skin for the first time since like a long time before. And then in the 60s, when there's this sexual revolution where women are more comfortable in their sexuality. And now I see the dark feminine as really being any aspect of our feminine energy that is not approved of and celebrated by the patriarchal construct. Because I think sexuality is like the entryway into the dark feminine. But now my perspective of the dark feminine is really she is a threat to the patriarchal system that we have. She is a threat to these systems that are stewarding corruption and the lack of harmony and balance and like pain and death and suffering on the planet that's not for the highest good. And yeah, I just spoke for a long time. I can just go on and on and on. As you can see, I'm like very passionate about this topic.
Yeah, no, but I think it was all really beautiful. And I mean, I just think it's interesting because like for me, when you talked about like the mad woman, and like I think the big fear that people have is, what if I don't fit into society? What if I don't fit into this box? And I really feel like for me, I could just speak for my own self. Like part of my destiny, part of my soul mission here is actually to leave this world much better than I found it. And that means change. And so that means change makers, people who are willing to change this 3D paradigm. And I feel like to do that, we have to challenge. We have to challenge what has come before. So you do need a little bit of the mad, maybe not a little bit even of the mad woman. You need that woman who is going to question the reality, who's going to question the society. So I really do feel like that's kind of what you're getting into. It's like, it's no more just the status quo. And I feel like this is the misunderstanding of Eve. And I feel poor Eve. I really feel, because I just really sense her divine presence in this moment. She really has such a heart of gold. There is such a purity. If anyone connects with Eve's energy, there is really a divine love, a devotion to creation. When you connect with her, there's such a pure energy. But it's distorted because all we see with Eve is like the one who was willing to lay under Adam. Like that's all we like, the one who took the apple, the one who conformed. Like that's like kind of what we see. And there's a distortion here. And so I really feel that part of like what we've been talking about, this good girl energy, really what it is how to conform. How, like, that's, I think, what you're talking about, how to conform. And I'm someone who I believe that we need like society. We need to be in positive, harmonious relationship, human beings together, because that's what's gotten us into so many different messes. Like we need to be in positive relationship. And yet I do feel that we are in an era where we get to kind of look at the world and see like, this might not be working. And maybe the leaders who are, the leaders who are in power, maybe they are not the right leaders. Maybe they don't have the vision that I have. And so I think that's part of the mad woman energy. I can just speak for myself because I have this. I have the vision, and people can come to me like, what? I've never seen that before. That sounds insane. That sounds great. I'm like, and for me, it's like, okay, just watch me do it. It's like, okay, great. You stand back. Let me do it now. And I really feel like that to me is the pearl. That is the gem of that mad woman archetype that you're talking about. And I feel like it's not, it is like a personal authenticity, but I think that it's a personal authenticity that benefits the whole of humanity and the whole of creation.
Mhm.
And like, that's really what I feel like when we step into this power as creatrixes, as conscious creators of this reality. We need, like, to me, like the mad woman archetypally, like she is connected to the higher realms of consciousness. And so just, I wanted to presence that. And I'm piggybacking off a lot of what you said, because you sparked a lot for me when you were talking. But it's also that like seductress energy, even when I do this, like the seductress. But I've also worked very closely. I work with Cleopatra. I work with different queens as well. And It's funny, if you look at Cleopatra, it's when it was like during like the time of Mark Antony, everyone in Rome was like groaning because Mark Antony gave back so much Roman land to Cleopatra. They're just like, oh, we don't know what to do. He just keeps giving more and more of Egypt back to Cleopatra. I share this though because that's her being like, hello, look at me. It's like, look at me and my power and my glory. And so that's just something that like I feel like she was able to use her divine beauty in service of a higher cause. And also there is no separation between her and that higher cause because she was divine and that cause was divine. And so I'm sharing this because really what I feel as we're talking, and this is just also an energy I love to connect with, is this energy of glory. And I think there is a glory to the divine feminine. There's a glory to the dark feminine. There's a glory to the creation that we are called to step into. And part of stepping into that glory is full mastery of all these different aspects of ourselves, many of which fit under the umbrella of the dark feminine that you were just talking about before.
Mm-hmm. And when we recover them, it's like my experience is that we don't know we're missing them until we have them, until we've recovered them. It's like, whoa. But because we haven't seen that many people embody it, or because we haven't experienced, it's like a fish in a fish tank. Like it doesn't know about the ocean if it was born into a fish tank.
Mm.
And when we recover it, it's just so much strength and vitality comes back. And we're not like leaking all this energy. It's kind of like if you go from being really, really anxious to then having peace, it's like how much space in our life was taken up from anxiety. And then there's so much more openness that's left when we're in a state of peace. And learning how to really embody our dark feminine is just really feels that same way for me. It's like, whoa, I've recovered an entire part of myself that I didn't even know was there. And now I feel so whole. And, I'm just kind of thinking about how like we've been, programmed of like, oh, find your other half. Like, yeah, maybe I should make that the tagline for Realm of the Dark Feminine. Find your other half. And I'm pointing over here because I'm pointing to the version of yourself that's in the basement that you locked there.
It's like
So go
like
ahead.
there all along. I love that. Yeah, no, I love that. And I really love the power that you're speaking to because I think for me, it's like what I just feel like for everyone who's listening to this call, I don't know if maybe some of the people listening are also men. It's really about embodying your full potential. That's what it is. It's like to me, it's like who did you come here to be? Who did you come here to be? What is stopping you from fully being that? And I heard this in a I think this is like I didn't come up with this, but it's like first you have to be what you're here to be, to do what you want to do, and then you can have like the things that you're really called to have. But people think it's the opposite. They
Mhm.
don't realize is that it's through that being first. It's like the being that you get to do and then you get to have. And I really feel that there are aspects of ourselves like we are infinite beings. We never like there's never a moment where you have finally reached the penultimate version of you. So I really feel that these are aspects that they grow, they evolve with us. They teach us these qualities. They're like noble virtues, and the virtues themselves have great lessons for us. So I feel like it's part of us becoming the fullest version of ourselves, like really learning what it is to be human, learning what it is to be here in integrity and wholeness and truth, is to really learn more about these aspects of the dark feminine.
Beautifully said. And the dark masculine too is a whole other initiation. I think that's separate, but like we have both. And a lot of people think, whenever I talk about the dark feminine, the dark masculine, people are like, we already have enough of that, thanks. And it's different. What we're experiencing now, it's a lack of masculinity. The dark masculine is the same as the dark feminine. It's the parts of masculinity that have been shoved down and not been allowed to be expressed, which all of it, like we have to reclaim all of this. And I'm just really passionate about this whole subject in a variety of ways that it can be expressed because without them, we are so easy to control. We are so like tamed. And when we learn how to embody this in mature ways that are for the highest good of all, which is like her root energy. It's like the same thing as money. You know, they say like if you have more money and you're a really good person, you'll become better. When you have more money, you can do more good. But if you're like a shitty person, then you'll do bad things with money. Like it has nothing to do with the energy itself, it's how it's used. So if we can learn how to steward it with integrity and with grace and with so much love, we'll change the face of the planet forever in the most phenomenal of ways.
Mm.
So I feel like now is maybe a good time for me to talk about Realm of the Dark Feminine for a minute. If anyone's watching this and you're like, what is this? I really want to know more. So this is my second year running this. It's a 9-week course. And we go into 7 different archetypes. And we spoke about a few of them, the truth teller, the mad woman, the high seductress. There's 4 more that we go into in this experience. And basically what my intention is for everyone who does this is that we learn what these archetypes actually are, because a lot of the time we've learned what the shadow aspect is and we're like, don't want to touch that, you know, we want to stay away from it. And we need to learn what these archetypes are in their exaltation, the wounds that we have that block us from even approaching. For example, like with the mad woman, or with the, let's do a different one. Let's talk about the truth teller for a minute. With a truth teller, like if your throat is completely blocked, if you're like so afraid to confidently speak, you can't access the truth teller. So that means that we would then have to look at what is causing this blockage in the throat. Is it past life healings that we can do? Is it fear of, you know, what is it? And we can get into that. That then opens up the portal way into you becoming the truth teller. And the really cool part is like each archetype, we all have different masteries. And so this is a live group program. And what we see is that, for example, maybe like Monica, I'm just coming up with random names. Maybe like Monica really embodies the high seductress, but she's not so good with the liberator. And then like Veronica is really strong in the witch, but she isn't as strong in the liberator. It's like we learn from each other, from the natural ways that certain people hold different embodiments. So like for me, the truth teller is easy. It's not really difficult. I can all, my God, you're like, really? There's more mastery for me, of course, in it. But for me, the high seductress was the hardest one to tap into. And so some of the archetypes will come really easily and you can develop even more mastery. And then other ones, you might be coming in, like so much of my family programming really blocked me from accessing the high seductress, feeling, we don't need to go into all of them because it's a lot, but I had a lot of programming around the muse energy and around women who are really bold in their confidence and that wasn't allowed, and women who want attention in quotes, you know. And so a lot of those belief systems, I had to really move through those before I could start to access the high seductress. But by going into the archetype to exploring it, I didn't know I had any of that programming before until I started to look at it. And then it was like I make everything as workbooks. So there in the course, there's video teachings, there's a Voxer group so we can chat all week long during by the time that we're going into each archetype. And then we have live group calls as well and workbooks. So I make these like epic workbooks that are basically going to become a real book one day. But I teach you about the archetype and then ask questions to look at, where are you holding this? Where are you afraid of it? What comes up for you? And in that process myself, I was like, oh, people in my family have demonized the muse for my whole life. So now I get to deprogram myself from that so I can access this. And so it really shows us like where we've been super programmed that we're not even aware of. So this program is amazing. I'm so passionate about it. And it's a really beautiful entry into the dark feminine that's safe. Because like I was saying, a lot of times when we have these really steep initiations with the dark feminine, it can feel unsafe or dangerous because the intensity is so strong. And I was telling Elizabeth this beforehand, like when we go into our dark feminine initiation, it can be like we're going into the descent from a steep hill. And you know, when you're like walking down a hill really steep, it's very difficult to walk. When we go into these archetypes first and learn about them, then what our initiations are like a brisk walk. they're simple, they're so much more effortless because we're comfortable with that energy already. So it makes these deeper initiations much more easeful, and in a way that they're not like disrupting your entire life. It's just little pieces, like little, oh, this DNA strand is just a little off. Let's just click that back into place. Perfect, you know? So that's about the realm of the dark feminine. We're starting on the fall equinox, which is September 21st, which is the actual timing, if you're in the northern hemisphere at least, of the descent into the feminine, the dark feminine, even on a seasonal level. You know, the leaves are going away. We're starting to have more of a stillness, moving from fall into the winter season, where we're going deep down into the cave, like hibernating almost. But in that hibernation, and even just like fun fact real quick, even the church has shifted these belief systems that us going into the underworld is scary and we're never going to come back, like how they've referred to hell. And the underworld is the primordial place of our power. It's where we reclaim these parts of ourself. And it's a rite of passage for women. And we continue to do it on a cyclical basis because we work in cycles. So the feminine does, whether you're man or woman or however you identify. So my point in saying all that is we're going into it in the time of year that really supports this energy. And yeah, so that's about Realm of the Dark Feminine. I'll have the link in the comments and description if you want to check it out. And you'll have to sign up by September 20th if you want to join. But I would recommend signing up early so that you can start to get into like the orientation materials and stuff and get yourself really ready for the course.
Hmm. Thank you. I think it sounds amazing. I think it sounds so beautiful. And I think it's just so funny because we opened today's call. I was talking about the Morrigan and the Cave of Cats. And actually, like that cave that's sacred to the Morrigan in Ireland is actually like known as like the mouth, like it's like the gateway to hell, the mouth of hell. It's like literally. And it's so funny because for me, it's like it's the gateway to the other world. And so it's that kind of misconception. It's like, no, that's not hell. That other world, like you said, is a place of true primal power. It's, to me, it's like creation itself. It's the realms of fairy, the realms of magic. It is the realm of pure potential and possibility. It is all that is possible. It is all that you are. And it's like stepping into that infinite aspect of self, that infinite aspect of creation, and not being afraid of it, to connect with it fearlessly.
Beautiful. It's like returning to the womb. Space
Yeah.
is dark and you don't know what's coming next when you're a baby in the womb. And you're just resting there, being nourished and fed and supported. Um, yeah. So this has been a beautiful conversation. Thank you, Elizabeth. If you're watching this, please like the video to support more people seeing it, and leave a comment. Let us know your takeaways if you want to add anything to the conversation. Elizabeth, is there anything else you want to say just about the dark feminine or anything in this vibe before we close?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for being such a gracious, wonderful host, like for bringing me on your channel. And yeah, I think again, like I just feel like the energy of the Morrigan inspiring everyone here to go forth fearlessly, to go forth fearlessly, to when you see a barrier, when you see an obstacle, to leap over it, to know that you have the power to do so, to trust yourself, even in the face of what may be impossible odds. That really is the message. Like for me, when I work with the Celtic goddesses, they know that the 3D world we're inhabiting, they know that it looks sometimes like a treacherous place, that things sometimes look impossible. We look at our dreams, our hopes, like the things that we want to create, and we say, how in God's name am I going to do this? And I just really feel the power of a lot, especially the Celtic goddesses. I can just share, they are here to walk with us. They are here to walk with us through, like to walk with us over those barriers, to believe in yourself, your own innate ability to I feel like to do the impossible. That is my final message for everyone today.
Beautiful. Thank you. And one thing I want to add about the realm of the dark feminine real quick is that also we work with goddesses. So for each archetype, I offer a few different goddesses so you can feel who you really feel drawn to. Particular ones like Lilith is like, this is all me. Or Kali's like, I'm your girl for this one. But we do work with the goddesses, and they're really the ones I see goddesses and deities as like, I'm going to take care of what I can take care of, but they meet me and the things that I can't necessarily move or the things I can't necessarily see. And so they bring this like otherworldly magic to the whole experience of working with them. And then it's also like you have someone who's really on your side as you're moving through these treacherous territories, as Elizabeth was saying, when potentially there might not be other people in our lives that can understand or that can support us. And also, this is a great reason why, if you're feeling called to like sisterhood around the dark feminine frequencies, joining Realm of the Dark Feminine, we're in a safe group of women who are all doing this work. And for me, my experiences, I've experienced so much backlash when I'm in my dark feminine energy that's not quite yet celebrated in our society. I get a lot of backlash from people that are afraid of it, or it's like too confrontational for them. In a way, when I know that I'm really coming from love and integrity. There's been other times that I've like not done so well with that. But when we're in a group of people who's all doing the same work, it's like it's like so nourishing because we just can be so supported as we're exploring it without other people's belief systems or constructs kind of like immediately just demonizing it. And we're like, well, this is too hard. I guess I'll just go back and conform. And for some of us, like the call will just be so loud, especially I feel when we've had a lot of lifetimes in these ancient times where we embodied this effortlessly. It was like the cultural norm. That call is so loud. Like for me, it's like, well, I guess I'll be alone then. And of course, that's not like what's going to be happening. But I would rather be holding this energy because it feels inauthentic not to. And to risk, that mad woman energy of like, well, if other people don't get it, that's okay. I'll always be brought the people who are able to get it. So the group dynamic in Realm of the Dark Feminine really adds a lot to it for many, many different reasons. So anyways, so we'll go ahead and conclude there. Thank you, Elizabeth, so much. I love having you as a guest so much. And you can be sure to see Elizabeth here again, another variety of topics. And I'll have all the information for where you guys can find her website, a free gift from her that she has, and where you can find her if you want to work with her as well, because she has a lot of beautiful offerings and is a very gifted writer and storyteller and soon to be filmmaker. So we'll be celebrating that on this channel later. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please engage with the video, like it, comment. This all supports us in just getting the message out more. And I will see you in the next video.